Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 35. Today, we will start producing electronics. The cost of the materials will be a bit of a drain at the beginning, but we will start working on removing those costs. The first step will be a chemical factory. We will need it to make plastics, electronic components, and we could also use it in our fabric factories. It's a very widely used material. We will also finish building the rest of the new construction area, so helicopters will be fully utilized by the end. Apart from their use in constructions, they are also a part of the production of electronics. Plus they are very valuable. Most of the episode will be about planning and supervising these projects. The chemical plant alone is going to be a bit of an undertaking, let alone the surrounding infrastructure that we need to build around it. And of course, the usual fine-tuning that prevents this house of cards from collapsing. The fuel storage was finished right at the end of the last episode. I could have started moving some of it over from Kirkimov, but I will be busy, and only do it later. Next, we will need to start moving people over to the electronics factory. The sooner we begin production, the sooner we can start making some money back. By the way, you may notice that the fast forwarding is a bit, well, less fast than usual. This episode is an experiment. Instead of setting the whole footage to 2x speed, I purposefully changed the speed to fit the entire episode into a nice and round 60 minutes. Let me know how you find it. This of course means that the inevitable dead air where I don't comment will sometimes be a bit longer than usual. Anyways, setting up that line reminded me to enable line spacing for the recently replaced Rail CO buses. Thankfully, the number of workers waiting in the Mikhailovia train station seemed pretty high. Next up, we need to add a turnaround track. The reason for this is because the stations in Mikhailovia are only accessible for trains coming from this direction. The only way for trains to go in from the other way is to go all the way to the Mutograd passenger branch and make their turn there. This is closer. The main reason I want to do this is the electronics distribution. I want to have the first stop in Mikhailovia, and with the current setup, the train would need to go all the way to Mutograd to make a turnaround. With this, the trip will be much shorter. As promised, the prison labor test is now concluded. It was a failure, and the citizens didn't really like the idea. They would prefer a more rehabilitative, instead of a punitive justice system. That's my headcanon, and I'm sticking with it. Electronics gadgets are piling high, ready to be picked up. No need to waste any more time then. Instead of using the rail distribution offices, I will just set up a regular delivery line, like I did with clothing, and other stuff that we would like to sell. So the first step is to get rid of all electronic purchases in these offices. I will start with a single box car, but it will not be enough in the long run. A very good problem to have. And that's it. The distribution line is up and running. Thanks to the astronomical cost of the imported materials, profits will be relatively low in the beginning, but they will improve as more and more of them start being made at home. And the single boxcar that we bought wasn't enough to pick up everything. Still, that's over 100,000 rubles worth of products. Given how slowly they are used by the population, this is going to be a pretty big money maker in the long run. Anyways, while that's going on, we can turn our attention to this little area between these houses. I didn't want to overthink it, so I just went with this simple long pavement. To give the monuments a bit more of a prominent place, I also added these small squares around them, so they stick out a bit more. While we're in the mood, let's fix these connections too. Now, the chemical plant. I will build its wood and crop supply right next to it, so I'd like to have quite a bit of empty area around it ready. Ultimately, I'll just place it behind the electronics factory. That area will be quite cramped by the end of this episode. A bit of a traffic jam. Should be easy to clear. By adding this signal, I somehow deleted quite a bit of progress on this turnaround branch. Usually the game recognizes how much of the tracks have already been built, but this time, it completely erased all progress. I wasn't happy. Okay, let's see how we can set up the supply of materials for the chemical plant. It needs gravel, so I placed a small aggregate storage next to it. Having helicopters in the construction business will be a bit of an irritation this time around. I will constantly need to tell them to buzz off by pausing their work here. I only want them to start building if everything is ready to go. Anyways, we will also need a source of crude oil, so a storage tank will be necessary. This whole layout will go through quite a few revisions before I'm happy with it. The biggest issue I will need to face is the way different connections are arranged on the building. Not even mirroring would help too much here. I will arrive at a relatively workable arrangement, but it will take a bit of trial and error to get there. At first, I will attempt to have a disconnected silo for the agricultural products used in the facility. Having to use trucks to move it between the two wouldn't have been a big issue. Still, we can do better. Right now, one of the two factory connections is blocked by that road I placed. Sooner or later I will give up this idea, and just move the aggregate storage to gain access to it. I was even ready to have the woodcutting station separated from the main facility. But that's what this game is all about. Planning, and getting rid of inefficiencies. At around this part, I finally gave up on this madness. Wood will be done through a normal, supplier, to storage, to consumer chain. Since we don't need to move it anywhere else, we can use the small open storage. This one doesn't have a rail connection, which we don't need anyways. I just wanted to see if I can bridge this distance with the factory connection roads, but I won't be able to, so I will move it in a second. Okay. As far as I can tell, that should take care of one of the materials in the chemical plant. Only 3 more to go. Thanks to that fire fiasco in the last episode, we are now out of money. Thankfully, it will be the quickest turnover of any loans we ever taken out in this republic. Once the materials stabilize in the electronics factory, it will be all better. Actually, the main reason why I needed to take out that loan was more for buying a second box car for this train. That will let us export more. Once this train reaches the customs house, we would have been in the green again. Still, might as well buy it now. Alright, back to planning. I finally gave up and just went ahead with the rearrangement. We only really need to make enough room for the silo. You may have noticed that we have 2 materials that require a factory connection, which means we don't have one free for the output. I could have used a warehouse for the crops and the chemicals, but I'd rather use a silo. Much more space for the crops. I'll deal with the storage for the chemicals a bit later. Now, here is a potential problem. The new prison only has 1 parking spot. Meaning, while the meat transport is inside, nothing else can be dropped off. And apparently, no sick people can be picked up by ambulances. For now, I only decided to send the fridge truck away, but in the next episode, I will need to tell it to stop fully unloading. For this one line, I will make an exception. Okay, we have the aggregate storage down, We just need the oil tank, the 2 train stations, and that's pretty much it. I only need to make sure I place them in a way that allows the rail tracks to be built. Don't worry, I'll remember the oil station too. Now, the most head-scratching dilemma I'll face in this episode is how to connect all that up to the existing main line. At first, I wanted to use the existing junction, but the road was at an angle that prevented me from placing nice, parallel tracks. Spoiler warning. This is exactly what I will end up doing. It will only require a bit of rebuilding. Yeah, I even considered extending the warehouse's tracks, but, thankfully, I decided against it. To prevent junctions being too close to each other, I even tried to build a new one further down the line, but the resulting tracks came out all over the place with too many twists and turns. I wasn't happy with it. Yeah, that's not going to happen. I finally remembered that I will need an oil station too. Better place it now, before I commit to a track layout that cannot incorporate it. My next idea was something I love doing in other places. An overpass. But sadly, there was simply not enough room to build one. Before I could reach that conclusion, I was distracted by the quarry dumpers queuing at the gravel processing plant. Now that we are full up, we can stop forcing them to fully unload. The combination of the small space between the road, the rails, and the power lines, it was pretty much impossible to squeeze in any decent-looking bridge. At this point, I gave up, and decided to just move the road a little to the side, to allow train tracks to go over it. For now, it's just 2 tracks that use this level crossing, but eventually, it will be 3. Right. Disrupting the roads broke the electronics factory commuter line. For now, I will only send the confused buses to the depot, but eventually, I will realize that I only need to extend the dirt road a little bit more, and it will all be fine. Now, this is a highly questionable rail branch. It's basically 2 stations served by a single 2-way track. Highly inefficient. Good thing it won't last. It won't take long before I decide to fix it. This is where I saw that I only need to extend the dirt path a bit more, and the buses can be on the road again. The next problem is that the track layers need to wait on the main line. Not much I can do about it until I decided to rebuild this branch. Then, I will be able to place Q signals that will let them wait off the main line. Creating the forest for the woodcutters will be easy, but we still need to do something about the crops. For that, we will need a farm, and some fields. I have absolutely no idea how much farmland we will need. I'll just place some, and expand as needed. As for the forest, I'll just fill all the nooks and crannies with trees, and see how long that will last. We are already close to 1,000,000 rubles. I will soon notice this, and repay that loan we took out earlier. At this point, I was ready to start building what I had placed down. As I said before, the rails will be changed a bit, and I will also end up building the mechanics factory here a bit later. And this is where I repay the loan. Got to be the fastest repayment we ever did. Very nice. Still a full load, even with 2 box cars. Cannot wait to have all the materials made domestically. This will even outpace the steel profits. Okay, the roads are rebuilt, so these dirt connections are no longer necessary. This is where I will try to see if replacing this single helipad is even possible, and sadly, it is not. The different connections are in the wrong place. I guess we will need to learn to live with this kind of waiting for the helicopters. We would need to move everything around to fit it in. Something to keep in mind for the next construction yard. Very nice to see so much steel in the Lukovo storage. It won't be long, and we will have some in the new construction yard too. Here, I just temporarily unassigned the COs from the new industrial constructions. I really wanted to finish building the new yard in this episode. I will need to build a second substation. The fuel storage tank is out of range, and we will need power for the trucks to load it up. I will now disable road construction for the helicopters. Regular vehicles are more than capable of doing it, but it would be nice to give them a head start on the buildings when they get to them. This is where I decided to build another industry. The easy choice was of course the mechanical components plant. It only needs steel, so the infrastructure for it will be easy to build. We only need an open storage to store the raw materials, and as usual, I will bring it in by train. This will be the catalyst for the expansion of the incoming rail tracks. I might have been able to justify having 2 low traffic stations on the same 1-lane branch, but 3, no way. Especially, since we still need a warehouse to store all the products made here. Since I couldn't add it to the chemical factory, I decided to just have a separate warehouse facility, and move the finished goods there by truck for the trains to pick up. Having it parallel with the open storage will be just fine. Three stations on the same one-lane branch was already too much. 4 is simply unfeasible. We really need to add a queue. This will be much more workable. This amount of queue space will allow at least 2 trains to wait if necessary. Unlikely for it to ever happen, but the biggest benefit of course is that it separates the incoming and outgoing tracks. That's the most important. Without this, trains would need to wait on the main line, and that's a big no-no. And we might as well run all 3 tracks right next to each other. This way, we will only have one big level crossing, instead of 2 smaller ones. The track layers will still block the traffic on the main line for a bit, but once enough of the new tracks are built, we can add signals to make them wait on the branch instead. The concrete factory is done. The gravel is already here, we just need to sort out the cement deliveries, and the workers from Mikhailovia. This time, I will buy the new cars for the Rail DO while paused. That way, they don't get picked up one by one, but all together at once. Now that cement is on the way, we can buy the buses. Since we only need 10 workers per shift there, microbuses will do just fine. Because of the distance, I will buy 8, and see how that goes. Replacing those Icarus buses for the rail construction office resulted in some predictably slow build speeds. That was expected. Still, a less harmful alternative to not having enough workers in the Mutigrad train station. Plus, we only need to build a bit more, and we can place signals. After that, they can be as slow as they like, they will still finish way faster than the buildings they go to. Alright. Only 3 buildings remain at the construction yard. The bitumen storage tank, the asphalt plant, and its helipad. After that, it's all fully up and running. I think it's time to place those signals. They are far enough into the track building to do it. Now, if only one of them are present, all other trains will be able to pass. If both are there, they will still block traffic. Still, better than before. And with that cement delivery finished, we have concrete ready to go. We just need to tell the Helicio where to get the stuff. And it's working. We have 13 tons of concrete en route to that open storage at the new industries. The bitumen storage is done. Time to change the distribution line, to include this in its list of stops. Nice. We have 50 tons ready to be used, once everything else is finished. Even the factory is ready to go. Only the helipad remains. Good. Now we just need to finish this single phase of building, and this construction zone is fully operational. You know, I didn't even notice it at the time, but literally the only complaints people have living here is the lack of religion and alcohol. Even in Mutigrad, there are the occasional people who miss food, sports, or culture. Not here. Everything is running perfectly. And the helipad for the asphalt plant is done. I'll assign it to the Heli-CO once I'm done playing gardener. And that makes all the materials accessible for the helicopter office. This is now a fully operational construction yard. The only inefficiency I can think of is that I didn't build a triple landing pad for the central materials. That's our biggest bottleneck right now. Time to sort out the fuel outpost part. We still need to deliver some gas to that second storage tank, so the trucks already in the distribution office can start delivering it to the buildings nearby. For now, I will buy 4 oil carriages, but I think it will be a bit of an overkill. After the first delivery, I will sell 2 of them. Plus, I will still tell the rail DO to only pick up fuel if the original storage is over 40%. We have the other office selling excess fuel when it goes above 50%, so domestic use is still prioritized. For now, I will only fill the outpost to 30%. That's more than enough for the area right now. This new apartment block got full real quick. And the train station seemed to be doing much better than before. I still might build a house or 2 on the other side, just to give it a bit of extra oomph. But the main focus should be Mikhailovia when it comes to housing for now. By the way, did you see that 40 tons of steel waiting in the mill? That's double the amount we managed earlier. Okay, with these signals, the track layers will no longer need to wait on the main line. Although, we only have 1 track segment left to build. After that, we only need to electrify the place, and it's all done. You might have noticed a small error I made. It will become obvious once I start building the catenaries. And there it is. Some of the segments were built using wooden foundations. No big deal, it will just delay construction a tiny bit longer. And since we don't have any of the buildings ready yet, it's not a problem. Okay. I will now sell 2 of the tanker wagons. We have about 700 tons of fuel saved up at the refinery, so picking up almost 500 tons all at once might be a bit much. And with that, this fuel outpost is ready to go. I'll just go around the place and see where we can deliver to, so the DOs at the refinery don't need to drive all the way out here. Now, I'll only need to remove these buildings from the Kirkimov DO's list of assignments. I knew it should only be one of them, but I still went through the other 2, just to be extra sure. I still need to tell them to bring fuel for the DO itself though. At least until I build a second one. After that, they can supply each other, just like they did in Kirkomov. Now, on to the plans for next time. I am not completely set on anything just yet. The most likely project will be a power station, likely coal-fueled. Thanks to the randomly generated nature of the map, the resources are pretty evenly spread, so it shouldn't be hard to find an area relatively close that has some coal for us to use. Plus, I still need to deal with the energy issues around Kirkomov. I keep getting distracted by other projects, and never get around to doing it. We also need to start taking the next step towards eliminating the imports at the electronics factory. The obvious choice will be plastics. Apart from being one of the materials used there, it is also needed to make electronic components, pretty much the most expensive imports we have these days. Once we can tick that one off the list, we are golden. Although, I might just go for the components straight away. We can still import plastics a little longer. I will decide when we get to it. We also need to keep expanding our housing situation. I didn't really check it today, but I have a feeling that we have quite a few people waiting for apartments by now. I only need to decide which town I want to do it in. Both of them need it. But I have a feeling that Mutograd is a bit more desperate for new workers at this very moment. On the other hand, we are about to open 2 new factories in Mikhailovia, one of which has a pretty big demand for workers. Another decision that we will need to make on the spot. These are pretty big plans all by themselves already, and I doubt we will manage to do all of them in the next episode. Still, they are all added to my to-do list, so it's unlikely that I will forget about them. Anyways, I hope you liked the video. If you did, dropping a like and subscribing to the channel just might motivate me to make more. Until then, see you later.